Hey YouTube. So I wanted to do a video today on a subject that is kind of like self-helpy. It's not something that I really am too conscious about all the time, but I have been kind of feeling the need to make a video on the subject of staying positive with respect to the goals of our advocacy, our cause, our movement, especially in the context of, veganism and all the other associated problems, right? There's a lot of issues, problems, atrocities, bad things happening, and it's really hard to stay positive. It's it's something that's you kind of do have to be conscious about because in order for us to be effective advocates, we can be the most effective by remaining positive, and we represent the cause the best. But it's hard. This is something that is relevant for veganism, but it's also relevant for a lot of other things too. This is just a general thing where there's like a lot of problems and there's not a lot really, that seems possible or doable or positive, hopeful, like things in general. One thing for me is human rights. I think that that's something that is something. It's something that's kind of like a really superficial way we talk about it in terms of like, it seems like it's like a lot of headline news and we talk like very broadly about human rights and things like that, violations of human rights. But like it's something that really warrants like a more detailed and substantive discussion a lot of the time, and it doesn't really seem to get that in general circles. And it's something that is frustrating for me, and this was kind of where I got my start on needing to stay positive because I've been focusing on human rights and international affairs for a long time, for quite a few years. Um, and kind of when I was in the thick of it, I had a few jobs where I was able to listen to the news and podcasts and panel discussions and whatever. And during that time, I was really, really in the weeds. And I got a lot of information about, um, you know, things going on in governments throughout the world where human rights were being violated. Just to use the biggest example that I'm sure we can all think of and have in mind is Syria. Syria, this is a civil war that's been going on for almost 10 years, and it's gotten like a lot of coverage, but the what happens on the ground with that information in our society doesn't really seem to be the same substantive information that's being reported on. A lot of the times I just feel like it's like a very brisk conversation about, Bashir al-Assad, bombed these cities today. Syrian troops, shot at these cities today. And people talk about how that's a really bad thing. But we're really like it seems like we're really far and away from having like a detailed substantive discussion that's not even just about like big government policy stuff or human rights as like an abstract issue, but like what people fail to incorporate into the discussion is that these are individuals who are being killed and targeted by their government. I think that we like start to have those conversations when we see pictures of Syrian children with blood on them, crying for their parents who've been killed in bombs, or when we see, Syrian children dead in photos. We start to kind of like have these conversations, um, but it's like it doesn't last very long and it doesn't go very far. And that's something that really frustrates me. It's sad for me. I've always had, for some reason, or maybe just because it was something that's always concerned me, um, I've always had an understanding and a real response, a reflex that said that these are individuals, that like they can be me, um, you know, and all all it takes is where you're born, and how are we in this privileged, safe country? How are we not paying attention to that, and how do we not care about the lives and the suffering of those individuals? We complain about government. I used to do this all the time. I would talk about Syria. That was always my go-to example when people complain about their government, the American government. I would say at least your government's not trying to kill you, right? That's something that too many people cannot say. And it's a significant human rights issue. And human rights issues go far beyond that as well. It's just one example of, in general, people kind of making it hard to stay positive. It was hard for me to stay positive in those days. In fact, I was a very negative individual, and I was very cynical. And I still am a little bit cynical, but I kind of have to prop myself up and be positive and remain positive because there's a lot going on psychologically or socially or kind of where people are not like ill-intentioned, they're just not paying attention. And maybe that's the best we can do right now. But there's no reason for me to kind of project or displace anger on people who are not paying attention. So that's one of my tactics, is reminding myself of that for staying positive. But another example of just generally how people maybe don't pay attention is democracy and political engagement. Now, this is like a big thing, right? And I'm sure we can all kind of think about in our own way what that means. But I'm sure we all agree that there's a huge problem in terms of people being able to engage in their political system and have faith in the democracy, and also the integrity of our system. All of these things are in question, and they should be. It's a major thing. But I think that the question that these things are in, it's like very basic. Like people are not really, again, we're very far and away from having like concrete discussions about the problems in our democracy and our political system and how to address or resolve them. We're like very far away from that point. Because right now, what we do is we all have a mutual understanding and an agreement that there's like a problem in our political system, but we just like blame Republicans or blame Democrats. And that's just not helpful. And it's also not accurate too, especially in this context, because our political system, our governmental system is like wildly complex. It's like, it's just like, it's almost like wrong. I don't believe that, but like, it's like, there's just so much. Like when you start to peel back that onion, it's way more than just like the two-party system. It's way more than just like legislative process. It's way more than like the presidential system or our constitutional, legal system that we live in. It's like all of those things and each of those things, and it's a lot. But it's hard to stay positive. Because there's a lot of issues, and it's a very divisive and toxic time, and we should try to stay positive. And one of the ways to stay positive is to say, hey, look, we have a lot of power in this country as individuals, in spite of everything. We have a lot of ability as citizens to contact our legislators. And maybe that's not the most effective thing. Maybe they're not listening to one phone call and changing their mind. But when I can call them and you can call them and we can get together and tell other people to call them and build a movement, a coalition around calling them, that's like when the needle starts to move. And that's a special privilege that we have being in a liberal democracy. And that is something to kind of remind ourselves of to stay positive. But it's hard to do that. It's a very negative time. Even like with veganism. So with veganism, it's really, really hard to stay positive. I'm sure for the vegans out there, you know it. Because you're thinking about and living a life that rejects so much of what we think it means to be human. It turns out these things that we think we need to be human, we don't need. But they're so ingrained in like who we are and how we are that it's really hard for people who are not vegans themselves to like start to realize like the reality or the objective facts about what's going on when people consume animals, or what's going on when people pay for factory farms to produce meat, manufacture animals, farm animals, however you want to characterize it. But like, you get the point. Veganism rejects all that. And it's not just like the big factory farm stuff too. It's even subtle issues like going to zoos and aquariums. The reason vegan is going to a demonstration in a few weeks where we're protesting the establishment of an aquarium called Sequest in Woodbridge, New Jersey. And that's included in this cause and in this way of thinking. And we have to be conscious of that as vegans, because we have we don't have no choice, but it's highly likely that we'll be like that because we're vegans. But when you see that, like when you have that mindset, and it's very radical, it's a very comprehensive lifestyle and philosophy where we're taking a stand against so many things that are like big and small, that it's really easy to start to get down in the dumps when you think about, just the subtle ways that people exploit animals, and the really comprehensive ways that people subjugate these systems that we've created that are just specifically for, the production of meat and dairy that we don't need to consume, that we continue to consume. It's hard to stay positive. I'm even getting a little down talking about it. So we need to stay positive as advocates. It makes us better advocates. It makes the movement look better as well. Because that's all that this is all about, right? Like, at least for me, and I think for all of you, it's not enough that we are vegan. We want to see more vegans. We want to see it be easier to be vegan. We want to see more sustainable practices throughout the planet, or we want to see a multitude of other things that mean less animal exploitation and less dependence on animals, and more sustainable practices and thinking of the ecology around us. We want more of that. And if we want more of that, we want to stay positive because it makes us better advocates. So there are different things that I do personally to stay positive, things I kind of have to remind myself about. And I'm curious for any viewers who have ideas for themselves how you stay positive. Put it in the comment box and let's share ideas here. Some of the things that personally help me is to always realize, like, at the end of the day, people are not like ill-intentioned, and they're not bad. Nobody wants people in Syria to be killed by their government. Nobody wants, people in Yemen who are being, kept in cities, and the Yemeni government is refusing to bring in medical supplies, and they've got the biggest outbreak of cholera in the world. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants, a lot of these atrocities. There's a lot of pressure that kind of keeps people from being able to abstractly think about that. I mean, I worked in a job where I, was able to listen to these things for hours on hours a day. At one point I pushed carts, and then I washed dishes, and I would just basically dedicate every hour of every shift to listening to, these issues. So I had a special exposure, and people, it's not coming to them in their homes, right? What's coming to them in their homes are other things, shows, Twitter, Facebook, with much more issues that are not like that. So it's always good to just keep in mind that, like, people are just not bad people. They're just not focused on that stuff. And they can be, and maybe they should be, right? But it's our jobs as advocates to make them want to be. And if we're effective, then they will start to engage and think about these issues. The other thing is to realize that, like, I was not always vegan, and I was not always this person. High School Scout was way different. High School Scout didn't care about human rights, and, in fact, I used to say, I used to say the epithet against homosexuals, that, all the time. And I was pretty homophobic when I was a kid. Now I'm like a social justice warrior, and if Young Scout met Current Scout, Young Scout would call Current Scout like a loser. I wasn't always this person is the point, and I wasn't always vegan. There was a time for about a month or so, my partner, Rebecca, was vegan, and I was not, and I used to laugh at her, and I used to think that's ridiculous. And I used to laugh at vegans and say veganism is ridiculous. And now look at me. I'm a vegan, and I'm saying being not vegan is ridiculous. People change, and also people's philosophies, the way that they think about things, are like highly influenced by their environment and their social conditions. So, I wasn't in that mind frame taking in information about veganism. I was taking in information about vegan cringe videos and other things, and I was just hearing about like the crazy people at PETA, and I had this idea, and this idea influenced the way I thought about vegans. And that's just like a thing about like philosophy or psychology, I should say, and just what it means to be human. Very natural thing. And then the last thing is for me to always do is to stay positive is to always remember that this is about like the movement. Um, you know, Maybe I want to say other things to people on Facebook when I argue with people on Facebook. Well, or when I discuss things with people on Facebook. Maybe I want to say something different. Maybe I want to say something more aggressive or more direct, but I don't. I always try to keep it, kind. I always try to keep it discussion focused. It's a dialogue always, and I'm always doing active listening because that's what we want to do as advocates. That's an effective tactic in child welfare advocacy as well. In child welfare advocacy, just like in vegan advocacy, there are a lot of stigmas associated with the cause that we're fighting for. There's a lot of stigmas against kids in the foster care system, impressions that people have about who they are. People tend to read the cover before they read the book, right? Veganism has the same thing. I still have to, shirk off these assumptions that people make about me that I'm like a PETA vegan. And I love PETA, by the way, but I am not PETA. I don't endorse a lot of the demonstrations that they engage in, but they do a lot of other work that's great and should be commended. The point is, it helps me stay positive to realize that this is about the movement, because it almost helps me realize that this issue is transcendent of who I am. It's something that's way bigger than me or us or it's about the planet. It's about the ecosystem. And sure, we're in there and we definitely count and we should think about us because we matter. But so do the animals, and so does the planet, and so does the idea that like we can talk about a secure planet and secure conditions for future generations. That stuff matters. Excuse me. I think we say it a lot, but we don't often act on it. And I don't think we're often that serious about it when we do say it. So that helps me stay positive. And we really do want to make sure that we're always staying positive. We're always good advocates representing the movement well, because we want to make sure that this is about something bigger than us. That's always true. And we also want to make sure that people can think about veganism in a different way. A big part of our mission in this organization is to like reframe and normalize veganism in today's world. Because I think that veganism has more false perceptions than accurate ones. And it's up to us as advocates to make sure that we're representing and promoting those positive representations and perceptions about veganism. That a vegan can talk with a dairy farmer and they can agree to disagree on some things, but they can respect each other as individuals. They could not vilify the other individual for the choice that they make to engage in that practice, even though it's bad. Um, Depending on obviously the setting and the demeanor of the other individual and stuff, obviously you match what you can. But the point is, as in modus operandum, we always want to make sure that we are representing veganism in the best way. That when we walk away from a discussion, people don't say things like, oh, that person is crazy, or oh, that person's wrong, or oh, that person hates me. Because we want people to be vegan. And we want people to think about veganism in a positive way. When people leave the discussion thinking about veganism in a negative way, they are less likely to adopt a vegan life. And they're also less likely to talk about veganism to other people in a positive light. We should make an active effort to make sure we play our part to say that doesn't happen anymore. And it starts with being positive. So I want everyone to think about that and put your own comments in about what you do to stay positive. My 3 things, again, are just to kind of Um, always remind myself that people aren't bad or ill-intentioned, and also that like I wasn't vegan once, and I also wasn't this like social justice warrior at one point either. I was a different person. And most of all, lastly, it helps the movement. It helps advocates do a better job at advocating, and it helps people think about veganism in a good way. So, um, just check us out on our website. We just are we're working on some new work. We're going to be putting up a podcast soon, and support us. We're really trying to grow here. We're still in the process of submitting our papers for incorporation for 501c3 status. We really hope to do that. And when we do that, we're going to need capacities and resources. And it starts with people supporting us now. If you appreciate our work, I can use a better webcam. We can use better recording material. When we go to these demonstrations, we're gonna be distributing our own leaflets and information material, and it would really help to be able to afford that outside of our own pockets. Because frankly, I mean, we're paying for this operation. We do have patrons, and we're very grateful for that. But it's enough to barely pay for our website at this point. So we really appreciate any support you can provide, and especially share the word. Check us out on Patreon. Share our content with others, and try to have a discussion, a positive discussion about veganism. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, right? Um, it would be great if we didn't have to exist. If we didn't have to do this work. If everyone already agreed that veganism was better, and if everybody already adopted a vegan life, that would be great. But that's not where we are. We're at a point where we're facing literal, you know, uh, extermination of a large part of our ecosystems, and the fact that our planet is not going to be the same in a dramatic way that pans out badly for us. And this is all imminent within our lifetime, within 12 years. That's what the IPCC report says. So we should really, want to do what we can to engage and be positive. And of course, it starts with checking us out, having the discussion, and always doing what we can.